Welcome to the Weekly Dose Podcast, your one-stop shop for the weekly news in incretin mimetic therapies, with your host, ManOnMounjaro, Dave Knapp. Welcome to this week's episode of OnThePen, the Weekly Dose Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. That's why you're here. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, that pen. That's what we talk about here on this podcast on this Tuesday, May 28th, 2024. Can you believe it? We're almost to June. This year has absolutely flown by. Y'all have helped it fly by. We just launched this podcast back in January, which feels like just yesterday. And already we've once cracked the top 20, actually several times we've cracked the top 20 in medicine podcasts for the United States. So if you would consider leaving a 5-star rating and review on this podcast, that really helps to get the word out. And we've made a ton of progress since January. So thank you for being a part of that. We've got some great news to get into this week. Thanks to our producer, Clark Kent, for the roster of information today. Of course, we covered a lot of this stuff throughout the week on our various social media channels. A plug to make sure you're following our YouTube, our TikTok, our Instagram, ManOnMounjaro. You can find us everywhere at ManOnMounjaro. Or if you just do a Google search of OnThePen, you're going to find everything that you need, or OnThePen.com, of course, which is a great resource for weekly articles on GLP-1 medications. But let's get into it. So there was obviously the big news in incretin mimetics this past week is the study that came out on Ozempic and kidney health. Check out some of the big top line information that came out of this study. So 1 in 3 people who have diabetes have chronic kidney disease. So treating chronic kidney disease is it's huge business, right? But for those who suffer with chronic kidney disease, these little bits of information about the treatment of semaglutide for kidney disease is absolutely fantastic. So check this out. They found in this study that people who receive Ozempic had slower rates of kidney decline. So that right off the bat is just excellent news. But furthermore, when you dig a little bit deeper, they found that people who took Ozempic had a 24% lower likelihood of having a major kidney disease event, like losing at least half of their kidney function or needing dialysis or a kidney transplant. So a 24% reduction. That is massive news. But maybe even bigger, Ozempic decreases the chance of dying in patients with kidney disease by 20%. Like, let those numbers sink in. We get, it seems, news on semaglutide every week that is absolute game-changing information in medicine. And I think what you'll see is this data start to extrapolate across the whole class of medications, which is really, really exciting. Of course, later this year, we have readouts, full readouts in the sleep apnea trial for tirzepatide. We have the full readouts for the cardiovascular study for tirzepatide. So we're going to get some great news for other molecules in the class too. But right now it is semaglutide's time to shine, and they certainly are. So kudos to the team at Novo Nordisk for the development of this and the foresight to run these clinical trials. Now, if you follow OnThePen, like we talked about on our other platforms, you will have already heard this, but we were one of the first news outlets in GLP-1s, like before any of the big names, thanks to our friend Mimi, who is in the retatrutide trials, who was a guest on OnThePen live a few weeks back. But Mimi, who lives in Australia, sent this information along that Australia has banned all compounded versions of GLP-1 medications. So that was a huge bit of information. And so essentially what you're going to see is for the unfortunate patients in Australia who really struggle to get access to these medications. Of course, those markets are sort of deprioritized in times of shortage because they don't pay as much for the medications as the United States market. It is a very, very, very hard thing to find these medications overseas in Australia. So to lose access to compounds is huge, but they've had some major problems. You'll have to check out the video that I did on the shutdown because there's actually pictures of some of the compounding labs they shut down, and they were using kitchen utensils, kitchen blenders to sort of put these medications together. So it was a crazy situation over there. And obviously you see that everyone paid the price. That's why on this channel, this podcast, we are very adamant about sourcing peptides and being smart and responsible. That's why you see us come out strongly when we see versions of these medications like retatrutide or oral tirzepatide that haven't been clinically tested to this point coming online in some of the areas of the country that offer telemedicine. It's a very scary proposition to be thinking about these investigational medications being offered through medical providers. So this past week, if you tuned into OnThePen Live, you had the pleasure of listening to an interview that I did with Scott from Planet Scott, who is in the survodutide trials. Now, survodutide is a dual agonist, GLP-1 and glucagon, that is a partnership between Boehringer Ingelheim and a company called Zealand Pharmaceuticals. It was an excellent interview, lots of information about that clinical trial from Scott. But what was really interesting news this week is that Zealand Pharmaceutical actually announced the latest phase 1 data for their GLP-1, GLP-2, right? GLP-2. Everybody's used to saying GLP-1. That would infer that there is a GLP-2, right? Obviously there is. And this is being tested in a dual agonist called Dapiglutide. We should call this one Iowatide because an Iowatide pigs outnumber people 2-1. But Dapiglutide, the GLP-1 and GLP-2 co-agonist, saw 4.3% weight loss after 4.3% weight loss after 12 weeks. And they have plans to complete additional phase 1 trials at higher doses. And they believe that they can get total weight loss to greater than 20% by the addition of the GLP-2 receptor agonism. So that'll be a fascinating one to watch, a new one for me. I had not heard of this one. So this one from Zealand Pharmaceutical, Dapiglutide, Iowatide. And so we'll have to follow this one. So GLP-2, if you can remember that one, log it away in your memory. We'll come back to that one at some point. Now, another really interesting piece of news came out this week, and I'm glad that Clark put this in the show notes this week, because this one was one that I had made a mental note of. A company called Inconovo. Inconovo has begun development in an inhaled version of GLP-1. So think of like your inhalers for asthma. Yeah, GLP-1s to be inhaled. So they're testing these. And there are a number of different sort of presentations of GLP-1 medications that are going on in clinical trials. We talked about earlier about how they're offering oral tirzepatide at some of these compounding pharmacies. Oral tirzepatide is also in clinical trials now by a company, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the company is called Lexaria Biosciences. I did a video on this past week, as well as an article at OnThePen.com if you want to check it out. But different presentations of these GLP-1s, where there be oral, now inhaled. You see versions of semaglutide injectable that will be injected into a gel form so that you only have to inject maybe once a month or once a quarter. So they are really playing with some of the existing molecules to find different delivery mechanisms for them, which would be a welcome reprieve to the pen shortage that we're seeing. Of course, hashtag release the vials. Anytime you're sharing any of your stories about the shortages and what you're dealing with, make sure you're using hashtag release the vials. We would love to see vial presentations released and not have to wait for these other formulations to hit the market. But yeah, so we talked about Lexaria Biosciences, which is testing oral formulation of tirzepatide using a process they call dihydrotech. And dihydrotech is basically a way to extract the molecule from the drug and then to basically surround it in fat-friendly lipids, molecules that are going to just help the absorption of the medication. So that will be an interesting one to watch, because obviously one of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about these peptides is the oral bioavailability is pretty crappy. That's why you see Rybelsus will be available in 50 milligrams. Now, we're just doing some quick math here. 50 milligrams of Rybelsus daily means that you would be taking 350 milligrams of semaglutide weekly, 350. Now, currently the top dose of Wegovy, which is injectable semaglutide, is 2.4 milligrams weekly. So you like 145 times the amount in an oral pill per week to get the same effect as you get in the 2.4 milligram injectable. So finding a way to make these peptides bioavailable, that's why you see a lot of these companies moving towards the small molecule versions like orforglipron from Eli Lilly, just because the bioavailability is not great with these oral peptides. But seeing Lexaria Bioscience, another company coming along and trying to add their technology to this to see if they can increase the efficacy of the oral versions. I think I did the math and it was something like over 700 milligrams of tirzepatide you would need weekly to equal the 15 milligram or some crazy number. So yeah, hopefully Lexaria can kind of find a way to make an oral version of tirzepatide a really palatable option for patients. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. Mounjaro this past week, you may have seen, was approved for the use in China. Now, the Chinese markets are obviously huge. There are more, by the numbers, more obese patients in China than there are in the United States. So currently, Mounjaro was approved, so it will initially be for the diabetes indication. You saw Dave Ricks come out say this week that they have not said yet when they will make Mounjaro available to that market, nor how much of the supply will be set aside for the Chinese market. But that will be interesting to watch, especially in the wake of all of these shortages that we're dealing here with in the United States. And Eli Lilly announced a major investment. This is another article we did at OnThePen.com. Make sure you go to OnThePen.com and sign up for email alerts so that you can get this news as it comes out. But $9 billion is Eli Lilly investing into a Lebanon, Indiana factory. So we're repatriating some of the API for Mounjaro and Zepbound tirzepatide to the tune of $9 billion investment in infrastructure here to manufacture the peptide. So, you know, I made it very clear in this article where I stand on this. I think this is an excellent move, not only for the accessibility of GLP-1 medications over the long term, but for medicine in general. I think it's very important that we as a country prioritize repatriating active pharmaceutical ingredients to our medicines to the United States. It has many implications, obvious economic implications. It has, in some cases, safety and quality implications. And of course, it has national security implications when we're talking about life-saving medications and having the ability to manufacture those within our own country. So kudos to Eli Lilly on this $9 billion investment in infrastructure to build the active pharmaceutical ingredient in Mounjaro and Zepbound tirzepatide in the United States. That is really, really excellent news. Now, a couple of interesting things came out this week about GLP-1 usage in young people. So this study was done from 2020 to 2023, and a number of U.S. adolescents using GLP-1s increased 600% from roughly 8,700 people to more than 60,000 in that 3-year time frame, and more than 3 times as many females ages 18 to 25 received the drugs versus male. So some interesting numbers there when you think about the youngsters using GLP-1s. And obviously there are some very interesting studies, clinical trials going on in very young children for the treatment of obesity with GLP-1 medication. And finally, this past week, we saw an interesting move by Nestle, the makers of Kit Kat and various other junk food items, get into the GLP-1 game by announcing a new brand, a new line of products called Vital Pursuit. Okay. So take that for what you will. Interestingly, one of the things that they have announced is the production of a protein-packed pizza that is fortified with different vitamins and minerals. Some of those minerals that we talk a lot about on the channel when it comes to things that you can supplement with on a GLP-1, talk to your doctor about. But magnesium, potassium, those are 2 big ones. Obviously, sodium is going to be another one. When you're shedding weight rapidly, oftentimes we're also trying to increase our water intake at the same time. And one of the things that can happen as a byproduct of these things is that we're flushing out essential vitamins and nutrients. So we want to make sure that not only are we prioritizing water, but always also prioritizing things like magnesium and potassium, and for some people, sodium as well. And so they're fortifying these meals and then sort of marketing them to users of GLP-1 medications as protein-dense versions of their convenience foods, including obviously protein bars and things like that. So this will be an interesting one to watch. Nestle, if you're watching, I would love to try some of these products and see what they're like. People have asked me what my own personal opinion is about these these convenience foods kind of coming out and being marketed to GLP-1. And I'll just kind of, my 10 cents on it really is, the food environment in the United States is tough. It's a tough place to live with obesity within the food environment and just the fast-paced nature of our culture. I think that anytime you can take junk foods, which are going to exist, they're going to be part of the food landscape in the United States. And so far as they are, I think that when we can add nutritional value to those items, when we can focus on things like protein, and we can focus on things like maybe some of the vitamins and minerals that we're lacking because of the standard American diet, I think that is probably positive. But, you're also sort of just kind of playing into the toxic food environment that exists in the United States. And so is it going to lead to real change? No. Is it going to be an option for those who are looking to pack in a little bit more protein in a meal? Yes, it is. So I am interested in what these things will taste like and what they will whether they'll have staying power on the market or not. But for whatever your thoughts on them are, they are coming, and we've been talking about that and telling you for months and months and months that these are likely going to be hitting the market. And so here they are. They're kind of coming fast and furious now. These companies are moving extremely quickly to bring options to market to suit people who are on GLP-1 medications. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do at OnThePen, the weekly dose. Appreciate you leaving a 5-star rating and review. If you enjoy this podcast, share it somewhere, share it into your Reddit group, share it into your Facebook groups. We would love to have more and more people just aware that they can have a one-stop shop for their news on obesity medicine, type 2 diabetes medicine, incretin mimetic therapies, all the things that are existing, all the things that are coming. We talk about it all here, and we couldn't do it without you. Thank you for being here. And until next week, we will catch you on the next one.